You hear me okay in the back? Great. So today I'm going to talk about maximizing your moderating game. So for those of you who have done usability testing or those that are about to start, it can be a little unnerving sometimes to be a moderator. You're not quite sure what to focus on, not quite sure exactly how you should be doing some of this, because some of it is a little bit more of an art than a science. So what I'm going to do today is share some of the tips and techniques that I've learned over the years, and hopefully get you up and running as a usability tester quickly and polish some of your skills for those who have been doing it already. So just a quick reminder about usability testing. What is it? Well, first of all, it is not market research. So nothing against market research, but market research often focuses on what users want and need. It's also, usability testing is also not the same as a focus group. We get one participant to one moderator, so we get very detailed feedback from one person and avoid some of the groupthink that you may get in a focus group. And as I said, usability testing is not about user preferences. It's about what people actually do. And it's not fluffy. It may sound fluffy, but it's not. What usability testing is it actually is a systematic way to observe user behavior. So we put the user in front of the product we're testing. Whether it be a website, a mobile app, or a physical product, we watch them actually use it. And with that, we learn a lot of the details of what works and what doesn't. So it's a great method to discover usability issues. A lot of times you'll uncover something in usability testing you never thought of. But just by having an actual user use it, you can see these things, learn them early, and modify your design. It's also an ongoing field of scientific inquiry. So usability testing is still a bit in its infancy in terms of true rigorous scientific protocol, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Some of the protocols that have been used in the past, some of the tweaks that folks have made, and what the current state of usability testing is. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is the Think Aloud protocol. That's the most commonly used. We'll talk a little bit about that. Then I'll get into what your roles are as a moderator. And yes, I said roles. We play multiple roles as usability moderators. And then I'll get into 5 rules of great moderating. If you stick to these, you're going to do a really good job. And I'll talk about keeping sharp. How do you keep your skills up as you gain more practice to make sure you don't kind of get lazy and sloppy? Okay? So first, what is Think Aloud? The Think Aloud protocol is the most commonly used usability testing method. That's where we have one participant and one moderator. The participant does tasks and thinks out loud and tells the moderator what they are doing at that given time. The origins of this come from cognitive psychology. So the original protocol by cognitive psychologists was to really understand short-term memory. So they set up a construct where the participant would think out loud off the top of their head what they were thinking at the moment. They would talk out loud, and the moderator was only an invisible observer. The only thing they were allowed to say was if the participant got quiet to continue talking, to keep going, tell me more. And the reason for that is that they didn't want to interrupt that short-term memory. They felt that there was a very tenuous connection between short-term memory and what the participant was saying, and they didn't want to interrupt that. But as that protocol is applied to usability testing, has some problems with it. First off, many practitioners feel that this strict no comments moderation is not ideal. First off, it often makes participants feel uncomfortable. So as you can imagine, somebody that doesn't know anything about usability testing comes in, sits down, you ask them to use your product, and they tell you things. They may ask you questions, and the only thing you say is keep talking. It's a little artificial, a little clinical. It may make them a little bit nervous or uncomfortable. And as a moderator, it also feels quite unnatural to respond. We humans are social creatures. We want to have conversations with folks. And it feels like a very strict protocol that doesn't allow us to do what we naturally want to do. But one of the more important things is that participants may get stuck in a usability test. You may ask them to do a task, they try to do it with the interface, they get stuck, they can't. And if you're not allowed to give them any hints, that leads to a very frustrated user that just sits there and doesn't know what to do. Another thing that I think is quite unusual about taking this Think Aloud protocol and applying it to usability testing is that we're actually after very different things. In the original protocol, what you were saying was theoretically supposed to be very closely tied to your short-term memory, so that's why there was no interruptions allowed. But what we're after when we're doing usability testing is understanding that system usability, which is really an interaction between the system or the product we're testing and the participant. It's something that's going on in the user's, between those two, and it's not directly tied to short-term memory. So the construct of not being able to ask additional questions and probe just doesn't seem to fit this particular model. So not too long ago, a couple of other folks came up with a modified protocol that they thought matched this situation much better based on conversational theory. So the idea is to set up a conversation between the participant and the moderator. We set the participant up as the main speaker, and the moderator stays neutral, just answering with short response phrases, things like, mm-hmm, uh-huh, and now, continue. That can prompt them to continue and tell you more, and you're allowed to ask for clarifications without actually biasing the participant. So the idea is to stay neutral and use the words that they've used. Things like, if a participant says it was odd, well, what was odd about it? Tell me more about that. And providing hints if necessary. If they get too far off track, you can correct them and get them back to the area of focus that you had set for your usability test. But the key thing is to be neutral. And the reason we want to be neutral is we don't want to bias the participant. We're still after understanding what's working and what isn't. But by being neutral, we don't bias them. People want to please other people. They want to please the moderator. So we don't give them clues as to, yes, that's what I'm looking for, or no, that's not what I'm looking for. Just stay neutral. Now, the reality of what's actually happening in the field is not quite as nice as this ideal, unfortunately. There have been a couple of studies that have looked at how usability professionals actually conduct moderated usability studies, and they found that many professionals actually get quite sloppy. They may ask leading questions, ask them, oh, are you going to print this? Because that's what they're after. They ask closed-ended questions, which are yes-no answer questions that can bias them. Again, people want to please us, so they're more likely to say yes. They also may focus on known problems for ammunition. Particularly if you have the designer also doing usability testing, they may have a preconceived bias of what they feel the problems are with the test or with the product, and they want to focus just on those things to get ammunition to tell their engineering manager or product manager, this is why we need to change this. But if you're focusing on certain problems and not just observing openly, what's going to happen? You've got blinders on, you're very likely to miss other things. You're also very likely to see exactly what you're looking for, even if it's not necessarily there. Also, usability professionals often use biasing phrases that we talked about, things like good job, yes, that's a problem. You're reinforcing to the user, to the participant, that that's the information you're looking for, or maybe that it's not. So the reality of the Think Aloud protocol today is that current practice goes beyond what we really feel we should be doing with neutrality and includes probing questions. Things like, did you expect that? What do you think about this? And there's some evidence that those types of probing questions may influence what problems are discovered. But that's only suggestive. We need, as I said, this is a continuing field of research, and we need more research to investigate how much of an effect that may have. So what does this mean? It means that current moderating practices are not consistent, and because of the way that our trade works, moderating is often taught through mentorship, so it's very easy for bad practices to continually be perpetuated from one to another. So that's why I really feel that moderators should be willing to examine their practices, be willing to look at things from an objective standpoint and understand the best practices of what they should and should not be doing in order to remain neutral to make sure that we get good objective data from our tests. So now I want to talk about your roles as a moderator, because all of that theory is good, but what does it actually mean when it comes down to running a usability test? And yes, you do have multiple roles. This is one case where having multiple personalities can be a good thing. For example, when your participants first come in, you obviously have to be a gracious host. Thank them for coming in, offering some drinks, welcome them, make them feel at home. Because after all, you're going to be asking them some tough questions. You want them to feel comfortable. You want to build rapport with them. You also need to be a guide, because most usability test participants have never done this before. They don't know what to expect. So one of your jobs is to guide them along and let them know what to expect along the way. And also be a neutral observer. Watch what they actually do. Don't just rely on what they say, because we all know that people often say different things than what they do. So keep an eye out for the actual actions of what they're doing. And be a curious learner. If you genuinely want to understand what they have to say and want to understand their opinions and their viewpoints, then you're going to get some great feedback from them. And last but not least, technical support. Because any of you who have done a usability test, particularly with technology, know that no matter what happens, something's going to go wrong. So be prepared to deal with that whenever the time comes. So I like to structure my usability sessions like this. It's almost like you go down a path and then you come back up at the end. I start with the intro, being a gracious host and telling them what to expect during the duration of the test. Then I ask some pre-test questions. Get them to feel comfortable, get some basic information about them, maybe understand some of their viewpoints about the general domain of what we're going to be talking about. Then as I have them do specific tasks, I also let them know what's coming, but I switch more to the observer and curious learner personalities here. Observe what they're doing and say, oh, why are you doing it that way? Understand this. What did you expect to happen here? All of those things. Be a curious learner to understand what they're doing. Then I wrap it up with some post-test questions, again, understanding what they thought of their overall experience, and then wrapping it up, thanking them for their time. And of course, you never know when you're going to need to switch into tech support mode. Well, one of the challenges, I think, to a good moderating a good session is to make sure that those transitions you navigate smoothly. And that's why I like to let them know what to expect up front. So now I'm going to talk about 5 rules of great moderating. So the things that I like to say is 1, know your goals. 2, stay neutral. Be responsible, be confident, and be genuine. So knowing your goals, you need to understand what you're trying to get out of the usability test. Are you trying to do a formative test? Are you doing a usability test up front in the design process, understanding some of the basic issues that are going on with the design? Are you after mostly qualitative information so that you can then take that information back and refine your design? Or are you at the end of the process? Are you doing a summative test? Are you trying to get some statistics on task times? Are you trying to see exactly how many different tasks people can accomplish with or without assistance? Are you doing this to make sure it's usable enough to release to the general public? Or perhaps you're benchmarking your existing site. Whatever you're trying to achieve, those are going to affect your style of moderation. And also you want to understand what your topics, which topics are highest priority to the business, whether it be your client or your internal business, because things happen. You may run short on time. You want to make sure that you know how to focus your attention on the right questions if time runs short. And as I said, staying neutral is a key to making sure that you're getting good quality feedback. And the easiest way to stay neutral is to be quiet. That can be a very hard thing to do. I know a lot of us, particularly when we first start moderating, you're a little nervous. When you're nervous, you tend to want to talk, but being quiet is actually the best thing. If you just sit there, allow the participant to say what they want to say, give them a couple seconds, they may say a couple more things that you never would have thought of. You'll get another observation, you'll get another good quote for that highlight reel. And as I said, don't insinuate that they gave a wrong answer. Why did you do that? What made you think to click that link? Particularly if you use that derisive tone, that's going to make them feel they did something wrong, and nobody wants to feel like they did something wrong. I mean, we're supposedly testing the product, not them, so don't make them feel that they did something wrong, because that's going to make them less likely to explore and tell you other things, because after all, they want to please you. Also, don't put ideas into their heads. It's really easy to slip into saying something like, does entering your social security number make you feel uncomfortable? But they may not have actually been thinking that at all. So don't put that in their head. Ask them, what do you think about this? And use their words. If you've got a dashboard and they call it a chart area, if you call it the dashboard, that's subtly giving them information that they did something wrong. So again, use their words. There's no harm in calling that a chart area just to get their additional feedback on it. Make them feel comfortable. And keep your tone naturally curious, not derisive, as I said. Another thing to do is to avoid yes-no questions. It's easily said, but there's pretty much an easy trick to that. And that's don't start your questions with a verb. If you start with a verb, you're almost always ending in a yes-no question. And particularly if you have a less than talkative participant, you don't want to let them off the hook by letting them answer questions with just one word. You need to understand a little bit more detail about what they're actually thinking, what's working for them, what isn't. So the opposite of that is to use open-ended questions. And the trick to that is to start with what, when, why, where, how. You could use who, but it's usually the participant, so it doesn't really make sense. But all of these end up being open-ended questions, where usually you'll get a good narrative answer rather than a simple yes-no. Also use neutral continuing phrases. You want to acknowledge that they give feedback, but as I said, don't imply if it's good or bad. If you say, oh, or interesting, those are actually assessing phrases. That lets them know that something was not quite what you expected, so maybe they're not behaving the way you expect them to, maybe they're getting things wrong. Or the positive, okay, yeah, that's good. All of those things, you're giving them the affirmative, so maybe they'll continue to give you feedback in that direction. It's much better to say neutral phrases like, tell me more, continue, things like that. It can be challenging to do, but with practice you can do it. And another rule of great moderating is to be responsible. You want to make sure that you realize that you do have responsibilities. You have responsibilities to the participant. After all, this is a human studies subject, human subject study. You want to make sure that you're protecting them, that you're protecting their not only safety, but their state of mind. You want to make sure you're protecting the company. Is it their client or your company that you're testing? You don't want them to get a bad reputation from this. And future users. You got to think about them. That's why you're here after all. You want to understand what's not working about the product so you can make it better for people who are going to use it in the future. So you have responsibilities to them. As well as your study integrity or your data capture. You want to try and make sure that you're getting answers to all of your questions from all of your participants as much as you can. But as you can imagine, sometimes those are a little hard to juggle. And another bit of responsibility, as I said, with your responsibility to the participant, you also have an ethical responsibility to follow the guidelines for human subject testing. And there's 3 things about informed consent that you should definitely be aware of. One is that you need to make sure you're getting voluntary consent from your participants, that they understand what they're getting involved with, and that you're disclosing the full bits of what you're conducting in your study. So your purpose, any risks, benefits, recording, observers, confidentiality, and withdrawal. A lot of this seems like overkill, but you want your participant to know that you have the best interest of them in mind. And also, just in case anything comes up, that you've covered yourself and you've done the right thing. And like I said, situations happen during testing and you may need to juggle your responsibilities. So what are your priorities? What should be your first priority at all time? Anyone have a guess? Safety? Well-being of the participant, right. How about second? Future users? Integrity? Could be company. That's where it gets iffy. It seems like in every condition I tried to actually rank these in a numerical order, and every time I did, I came up with a reason why it wasn't quite right. So my answer is it really depends. You have to understand, obviously participant comes first, but with the others, you have to understand what the situation is and what you're trying to achieve and make a judgment call. So some situations I've run into is, well, what if the participant doesn't want to be recorded? What do you do there? And what I've done is said, well, I have my participant to consider. They don't want to be recorded. So the implication of that is I'll get less detail recording for my study. So I might compromise my study integrity for a little bit to make the participant comfortable, but I'm still likely to get the same information that I would as long as I take really good notes. So that necessarily isn't a showstopper there. Just don't record them, make sure they're comfortable that they're not being recorded, and continue. Or if you don't have time to ask every question. You know, as we said earlier, if you know what your priorities are, if you know what your company wants to achieve, if you know what topics are likely going to help you make the design better for future users, then you can, again, maybe you compromise your study integrity a little bit and don't ask a couple of questions, but you make sure you get your highest priority ones answered in the time that you have. And this one was one of my favorite recent ones. I had a participant who just ranted about the website and called it crap. A little bit of a crotchety old man, didn't really want to say much, but he had an agenda. He knew what he wanted to tell us. So he came in, and I said, okay. I decided to take a little bit of time and let him rant. I said, okay, tell me what's crap about it. Used his words, threw him a little bit of a curveball. He was a little bit surprised, but then he proceeded to tell us what was crap about that website that he visited every day. And once he got that out of his system, it only took about 5 minutes, but then I was able to focus him on the questions that I had in mind, and I was able to get him to go through the rest of the study, giving me really good feedback about different things. And I assured him that the company was grateful to have his opinion because that is why we had brought him in. So I satisfied his need to rant, made him feel better about himself, yet also maintained my study integrity. So sometimes you have to be compromising in order to get through a particular situation. So another rule of great moderating is to be confident. Because you're in charge here, again, the participant probably hasn't been through usability testing before. They don't know what to expect. So you want to be confident and guide them through. So project confidence, and if you do make a mistake, keep going. Because I guarantee you, nine times out of 10, the participant isn't even going to notice that you made a mistake. And don't over-apologize. If you do make a mistake, apologize, move on. No need to dwell on it. And pause to collect your thoughts. That's always allowed. What may seem like a long pause to you is probably going by in a microsecond to them. And if you can't do that, then fake it till you make it. And I don't mean to be totally fake. What I mean is to just fake your confidence. Pretend to be an actor. Pretend you're going on stage. Pretend you're a confident moderator. And if you get yourself into that persona, then you're going to act like that. You're going to feel that, yes, I'm a confident moderator, I'm going to do this. And the first several times I did that, and I was able to get through it, it didn't feel natural to me at first, but it worked. And it got me over that nervousness hurdle, and then I found I was able to moderate just fine. So the interesting thing is I do say fake it till you make it, but my next rule is to be genuine. So it's just a way to psych yourself out. But what I mean by being genuine is if you're genuinely interested in what the participant has to say, you're going to come across great and you're going to get some great information. And does anybody recognize the gentleman in this picture? Anyone heard of Ellis Marsalis, jazz musician? I was very lucky when I was in high school, and I played trumpet, and I got to perform in a local jazz orchestra that got to perform with him and do a workshop with him. And doing the workshop, we were the trumpet section, we were doing the doo-wop, doo-wop, doo-wop stuff, and he's practicing with us. At some point, he just cut us off. He said, "Kids, quit playing like you're white. Don't play the notes on the page, play the music." And I was about 17 at the time. It probably took me about 10 years to understand that message. But I finally got it. And I think the same applies to great moderating. You don't want to read the questions from the page. You want to have a conversation. So how do you get to that point of having a conversation? You want to be genuine. So you listen. Now, as I said, be quiet. Genuinely listen to what the participant has to say and respond. Go ahead and look at them. Go ahead and be curious. Ask them follow-on questions. What did you mean by that? Tell me more. And stay in the moment. Don't worry about the past if you said something wrong a couple minutes ago. Don't worry about what they're going to do next when they get to the next page. Create a conversation and stay in the moment. Much like you have a conversation with your friends and family. That's what you want to do. And if they feel that you're genuinely interested in them, you'd be amazed at the detail of information they will give you. There's actually been some studies I've done in the medical field, as well as in the financial field, where people were oversharing information. They start telling me about their medical history, and I have to say, hold on, time out. I appreciate you willing to share, but what I'm really focused on is this. And I don't need to know all that detail. Same thing with financial information. They'll share a lot more than ethically you feel like you should be knowing. So just watch what they're sharing and make sure you're staying on topic. So let's say you've got those all down. They all make sense to you. You've moderated a lot of usability tests. What happens? You might think, oh, I kind of know all this stuff. I've been doing this for a couple of years, no problem. But it's really easy to get sloppy. And I have been doing this for many years, and I've worked with a lot of different moderators. I've seen some that are very experienced that are not as good at moderating as they should be. They probably were at one point, and they got sloppy. I've also seen others that have done a fantastic job at keeping their skills sharp. And the first thing to do is to identify your improvement areas. Understand where you are today. You can start this today. And the most important thing, I think, is to watch your own videos. And that doesn't feel good, trust me. The first time I watched my video of a usability test, I had my eyes over my hands and I was peeking out just like a horror movie, because it just made me squirm and feel uncomfortable. Oh, did I really say that? Why did I do it that way? I should have said X, Y, Z. But if you don't know, you can't make it any better. So watch your videos, understand what you're doing, what are the areas you need to work on, and that's okay. Also have your colleagues give you feedback. I have the wonderful opportunity that I work with some fantastic moderators. We watch each other all the time, we take notes for each other, give each other feedback. It's a great way to keep on task. Now I may focus on, I was talking too much on the last test, so now I need to be quiet, and then I slip up and ask a couple closed-ended questions and somebody reminds me, oh yeah, I gotta keep that in mind too. That's a great way to keep sharp. And also learn from others. Watch others moderate. I've learned some great techniques and tips from watching others do things, some great ways to phrase questions. Also learned a lot of things to avoid. But that's one way to keep learning. And be a participant if you have the opportunity. I had a chance to do that not too long ago, and it reminded me what it's like to feel to be sitting in the other chair and not knowing what's going on. You're not quite sure what's going to happen next. And heck, I even listen to talk radio interviews or news. If you listen to journalists interviewing people, listen to how they're asking the questions. That can sometimes give you good ideas on how to phrase your own questions in your usability tests. And practice your skills in everyday life. You know, a lot of what we do as moderators, you can just do in everyday life. People watch. That's a fun thing to do. Watch what others are doing. Practice your observation skills. And be quiet and listen in your everyday conversations with your friends, significant others, family. Ask them some open-ended questions. Now go to your grandmother. What was life like when you were a kid? Be amazed what you'll learn, and you get to practice some of these skills of how to ask open-ended questions. It really enriches some of your relationships as well. But the most important thing about moderating, just like public speaking or any other soft skill like that, is to practice. And remember, nobody's perfect the first time. Nobody's perfect the second time. Nobody's perfect the 10th time. It takes time and constant reminders to yourself to stay on top of your game. Do your best, and you'll continually improve. And you'll be awesome in no time. Questions? Yes.
What advice do you have for those of us who don't test in a lab, we're in the field intercepting people on the street? How's that challenge your moderating skills?
Oh, you got to be really good at thinking on your feet for sure. That's a good one. I would say you definitely have to have a lot of practice. Make sure you know what questions you're after, what your priorities are. And try to follow the participant in the conversation, but keep that mental checklist of here's the 2 or 3 things that I want to make sure to get out of this conversation, so that you make sure that you're focusing on what you need to focus on. Because yeah, you don't have your sheet of paper there with you to really keep you focused, do you? Not always, yep.
Any other questions? Okay.
There you go. They will be on SlideShare. Yep.
Hey, Susan. I was wondering what you thought about unmoderated think alouds, like that you can do over video. Because I know there's some folks here that do that, and I was curious your perspective on that when you can't, ask follow-up questions or get feedback.
Can you tell me more about what you mean by unmoderated? Is this a remote session?
Yeah, like a remote session where, so a gentleman earlier presented about you could find people out there, hire a company maybe, and like they find folks who have cameras at their computers, and then you can see what they're doing and you hear them talking, but there's no one asking them questions, there's no one doing it, and then you just get the videos later. Okay. So you've asked them to do certain tasks, but there's no one there asking any probing questions or follow-ups or anything. So I was curious what you think about that and where that might fit in your research.
Oh, I think that's definitely another technique that can complement in-person usability testing. I think the challenge with those is that you want to make sure that you are asking the right questions. So I think the challenge when you have that remote testing that's unmoderated is you might want to do a couple moderated first so that you can ask those probing questions and find out exactly what the right questions are. The right tasks, for example. Yeah, what the right tasks, how do you want to word it, to make sure that you're getting the information you're looking for before you go out and have 10, 20, 30 people do it. You want to make sure you fine-tune your protocol and those questions. Yeah, but I think you can get some very good feedback from those as well.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you. And if you follow me on Twitter, my slides will be up in a couple of days. Thank you.